Hi, Beacon Church. I'm Janet. I'm one of the members here at the church. And here I am at Lake Sunapee in New Hampshire. No, not really. But anyway, you'll understand the backdrop to this YouTube video as we go on. I guess this is the story of my perseverance in job and career things, perseverance in the workplace. And I'm really grateful that Nathan asked me to talk about this, because back in February this year, I was in the USA working, and I started writing what I call the Dartmouth story, but really was a story of God working in my life and how things just began to fit together and so on and so on. And I guess this is really a sort of a whistle-stop tour, a snapshot of the story, which I'm still writing. And just to say, it's sort of based on things in notebooks. I keep notebooks of things that happen, that I think that are important, that God said to me, prayers I prayed, and so on. Also things in Bible margins. I'm one of those people who writes in books. And things from sermons and dreams and so on and so on. And I guess it really sort of highlights how I've learned perseverance through sort of praying, waiting, trusting, believing, taking risks and reminding myself of God's promises. And it's really also the story of my life as a Christian, part of which has involved figuring out what I'm good at, what it seemed that God had made me to do in this world. So big questions. And I guess along the way, I figured and understood that it was so obvious. I love traveling. I love being on the move. Unlike many people, I love new things. I love change. I love challenges. I love being stretched. I also love studying and working. And when I was at school, I used to do projects in the holidays that I made up for myself. They weren't homework or anything, because I just loved working on things. I love teaching people. I really enjoy trying to make complicated things understandable without dumbing them down. So adding all these things together, it's not surprising perhaps that I became an academic in my work life. And I really always, right from quite a young age, wanted to use my academic skills and experience to do good, to make a difference, and to help people experience the culture of God's kingdom. So sort of fast forward from when I did my degrees to 2006, and with a number of other people, including Eric, I was at the Brighton Leaders Conference. And these were always amazing times of worshipping and being with people and hearing God speaking. And I guess I began to get a really strong desire to work abroad in academia, to work in an overseas university. I had no idea initially whether I was really sort of hearing from God, or whether it was just because my love of traveling or whatever. So I had to sort of figure these things out as time went on. I already had worked in 2 different universities in medicine and health, and I'm a medical statistician, and broadly speaking, I'm mathematically trained, and I design, analyse, interpret, and look at data from research studies to help us understand why people get ill, how to treat them, how to make them better, how we can prevent illness, and so on. And by that time, 2006, I was a senior member of staff, and I really wanted to use the influence that I had there to make a difference for the kingdom of God. And I remember a colleague of mine sort of saying to me that I really should get involved in gender equality issues, because I had influence and it was important to use them for good. So anyway, that planted some sort of seeds in my mind of things that I might do, and actually did end up doing some of those a little sort of down the line. But But anyway, I won't talk any more about that for now. But so with this sort of desire and feelings and thoughts of wanting to work abroad in academia, I did what many people do in those sorts of situations, and I pushed some doors just to see if they would open. And as it happened, the university that I was working at the time had a sabbatical scheme, which meant that members of staff could apply for a short time away from the university to pursue a particular academic project, which they wouldn't normally have time or the ability to do within the normal work setting back in the UK. And so, to cut a very long story short, I took 2 months leave to start writing a new medical statistics book for doctors, and writing it with Phil, our son, who by then was just finishing medical school. And again, sort of cutting short a lot of stuff by a series of coincidences, things coming together. I guess I'd say God planned it. I ended up at Dartmouth College, New Hampshire, a United States Ivy League university, for my sabbatical. And during the time there, made a really good start on writing the book. I was there for 2 separate months in October 2007 and May 2008. And I also did some teaching there. I offered to pitch in and help, and rather than just sit at a desk and beaver away on my own. And as it happened, there was a staffing gap at the university, and so I was able to do a bit of teaching, which was great. And Eric came on those 2 trips too, and we had a wonderful time. And we made really good friendships with work colleagues, and also with church there, Wellspring Worship Centre. We'd been told about that church by people back in the UK who said that they knew of it, and it was very similar to the sorts of church that we go to here in the UK. And, you know, really interestingly, the very first Sunday we were there in October 2007, we met 2 families that we've stayed really good friends with over the past 10 years. And they are amazing people. But we've also met a lot of other fantastic people and formed really good friendships with work colleagues and people who live sort of in the area. So, I mean, right from the start, I really felt I belonged there at Dartmouth College. And there was a vacant post because, as I sort of mentioned earlier on, there was a staffing gap. And I always sort of felt that job was mine, probably a little bit arrogantly. But actually, it was many years later when everything fell into place, and I did begin working there. And so I had to learn perseverance and faith and patience and all that sort of stuff that's quite hard. Along the way, I read things in the Bible and in books that spoke to me, and lots of really poignant things. And back in 2012, I received a very strong, specific prophetic word from a visiting prophet at the US church that we were at. And he didn't know my story, so he wasn't primed in what he said to me. But I said I wanted guidance, because at that time I was beginning to have very early conversations with people there about working there, but just wanted to see God's guidance and didn't want to pursue something that really wasn't right, however much I wanted it. And I've got a transcript of the prophetic word that he gave, and part of it was that he said that God tells you that there's coming a series of divine appointments and a series of divine arrangements that's going to make things just come together, like Solomon's temple, where they cut stones away from the building sites so that when they came together, there was no noise. There's a lot of things happening in the unseen realm that you don't perceive. Things are being fashioned so that when they come into your life, they fit together with no sound of the hammer or the chisel, because God will have been doing the chiseling afar off. And I remembered the story of Solomon and building the temple, but I didn't remember any of the details. So I was really quite intrigued by it. So I looked it up. After I got home, when I got a video, an audio, and was able to transcribe it all. So this was some weeks later. And I was reading the story in 1 Kings chapter 5 about how Solomon built the temple and sort of all the stuff that went with that. And there was a bit that said, King Solomon conscripted labourers, workers, and he sent them to Lebanon. So they spent 1 month in Lebanon and 2 months at home. It's just a little sort of extract of that quite long passage. And this is quite an obscure sort of detail, and the Bible is full of lots of details like this, which is what makes it so real. But actually, that was really important or meaningful to me, because the medical school at Dartmouth College is in a town called Lebanon. And it seemed to me that this passage, via the prophetic word and my reading, the Bible stories that sort of went alongside it, was actually giving like a sort of a blueprint for how it could work out for me to work at Dartmouth College. In other words, I wouldn't be there all the time, but I'd spend some time there and some time at home. So I filed that one away, as you do, and sort of waited to see what happened. I also experienced a season of really vivid dreams, which seemed to confirm that I would end up working in the US and at Dartmouth College, and maybe if you're interested, you can ask me about that sometime. And just to say, like many testimonies that I've heard people give, where they really feel that God is leading them in a particular way. We experienced false starts and delays when it seemed that I'd get the job at Dartmouth and that door was shut, and that happened several times, which is hard. And Eric and I didn't always have an easy time in the US either. We had some silly accidents, nothing terribly drastic, but silly accidents. And I was ill twice, June. I don't know if you remember, but 2 years ago, I came home from the US with a broken big toe, which I discovered is a really big deal, and that took some weeks to heal. And people were saying, as people do when these things happen, oh yeah, you don't want to go to the US, it's dangerous over there. But I really wasn't having any of that, and I just was really convinced that despite the obstacles, that I was meant to be there. So I hung on to all the dreams and the words, which I took to be promises from God. And I read and I reread Bible stories about people who heard from God and yet didn't have an easy journey. And, the Bible's full of people who had those sorts of experiences. You think about Abraham, who had a very specific call from God, and he had a really tough, testing journey. Joseph was another person who had a clear commission from God and really struggled for many years to see it actually come to be. And Moses, who was called, I think, when he was finally called, and he was 80, so he's a really old man, but called to do something really amazing. So I hung on to this stuff and just kept encouraging myself in trusting that what God had said would come to pass. But also, I sort of hung on to it lightly. I don't know if that makes any sense at all or just sounds completely balmy, but I always had the sense of, I'm really pretty sure this is what God has said, but actually, if it turns out not to be the case, then I will trust him. So fast forward, last year, about this time last year, I finally got a job offer. So, that was started really in sort of 2007, so a long time. And so I now have a part-time job as professor in the Department of Epidemiology. It took a while to get a work visa, but that finally came through, and I started working in February this year. And the plan was to work out there in chunks of time, making up about a third of a year spending out there. But COVID came, so the perseverance continues with the lockdown. I left the US in the middle of March and came home, and have been working remotely with my US colleagues ever since. They're doing the same, so we communicate by email and lots and lots and lots of Zoom meetings. And even in the autumn term, the fall, I'm going to be doing 4 classes by Zoom, which will be an interesting experience. So I don't know when we'll be able to go back to the US. We have stuff out there in 2 different places, but I'm confident we'll go back. And just to say, God is good. I thank him and I give him all the glory for all of this. And actually, that's the most important thing. That's the bottom line, not the job. The important thing is knowing God and knowing his purposes for me. So, I seek to be a blessing to people, to make a difference wherever I am, in whatever I do. And finally, I just want to thank Eric for being so willing to be a partner in this ongoing crazy American adventure. Thank you.